Hi everyone, Hugo here, one of the co-hosts of the show. What you're about to watch is a highlight from one of our most recent episodes. To get access to the full version, receive 2 exclusive episodes a month, get every episode 1 week early, and help us stay as independent as possible, support us on Patreon through the link below. Thank you. Now enjoy the show.
The misconception that there was once a Constituent Assembly, it was a democratic organ, and that supposedly the Bolsheviks did not win the elections and they were democratically unpopular. So by force of arms, they dissolved the Constituent Assembly and instead pushed forward their political will through the Soviets.
It's the perfect example in the Russian Revolution of the phenomenon we observe today of right-wing grifters just spewing bullshit in like 3 minutes, and then it takes like an hour and a half to debunk everything because it's like I don't even know where to start telling you how wrong you are.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
So I will try. So the Constituent Assembly starts to become a buzz phrase shortly after the overthrow of the Tsar. So the Tsar is overthrown at the end of February 1917, and then the question becomes, how do we form a new government? What do we do? There are a couple of complicating factors to finding an answer to this question. One, the country is still at war. Germany is still on Russia's Western Front. The Tsarist Duma, through a complicated process, morphs into the provisional government. But then the workers also form spontaneously their own Soviets, not just in Petrograd and Moscow, but all over the country. So you wind up with this dual power in Russia for most of 1917, where you have the popular organs of the Soviets representing the workers and the peasants coexisting with the provisional government and more official channels. And the tension inherent in this dual power relationship is held at bay for a time by the promise of a constituent assembly. So the idea is we're going to have a grand coming together of all the sections of Russian society as soon as we can to hash out a constitution, to figure out what the laws are, what kind of government are we going to have. The problem is, and the problem with the idea that the Constituent Assembly was a legitimate, quote-unquote, democratic institution, is that the provisional government keeps pushing back the date when there's going to be a Constituent Assembly. First they say April, then they say August, then they say November after the October Revolution. So they just keep pushing it back and back and back, and the demands keep building up, but the government is unwilling or unable to call this assembly. So Lenin realizes, okay, this government is on its way out. It is defunct. It needs us to protect itself from its own military, which they demonstrated in the Kornilov affair. So we now need to orient ourselves, we the Bolshevik Party, need to orient ourselves and the workers towards taking direct control, because this Constituent Assembly isn't even going to solve anything. So they effect the October Revolution on October 25th, 1917, and they form a new government, the Soviet of People's Commissars. So instead of ministers, they have commissars. And they reaffirm that, okay, there is in fact going to be an election for the Constituent Assembly on November 12th. We're still going to do that. The problem with holding the Constituent Assembly elections on November 12th is that A, there's been a revolution, the provisional government has been overthrown, and now there's a Soviet government. And B, and this is a little technical, the Party of the Peasants, the SR Party, which stands for the Socialist Revolutionary Party. Throughout 1917, there is a growing schism within the SR Party. And you have the right SRs and the left SRs. The right SRs basically wind up being the petty bourgeois, small land owning portion of the countryside, and the left SRs are more the poor and working peasants. For the election on the 12th, they're using party roles from before the left SR and the right SR parties formally split from each other. So in the countryside, when you're voting for the SRs, even if you want left SRs, there are no left SRs. No one is denoted as left or right on the party rolls. So you just see SR party, I'm just going to vote for the SR party. Because of this, the SRs wind up being overly represented in the Constituent Assembly. The Bolsheviks win, I think it's like 35 or 40% of the overall vote across the country, which is pretty impressive since the working class, again, is only about 10% of the population. But the SRs do have the majority. They decide to call the first session, what turns out to be the only session of the Constituent Assembly, in early January in Petrograd. What the Soviet government quickly realizes is that the Constituent Assembly is actually going to be very combative towards the Soviet government. So then they have a choice. Do we give in and try to compromise with a Constituent Assembly that is very obviously combative towards us and wants to undo everything that the revolution has already won? Or do we just kind of ignore them? And they do give the Constituent Assembly, the delegates there, they do give them opportunities to like compromise. They give them a couple of conditions. They say, hey, we'll work with you on this and that, but you got to give us this. And the right SRs that are in the Constituent Assembly reject all of these terms. And at that point, the Bolsheviks and the left SRs realize, okay, well, this is a non-starter. This isn't going to go anywhere. So they just leave the Constituent Assembly, which leaves only the right SRs there. And basically, after the Bolsheviks and the left SRs leave, they give orders to the guards not to violently disperse or arrest or harass any members of the Constituent Assembly. They say, just let them talk. No one's listening. What's it going to hurt? Just let them wear themselves out. And eventually they do, and they go home. And then they lock up the Constituent Assembly, like they lock the hall and they're not allowed back in. And that's kind of the end of the Constituent Assembly. Now, if you hear that story, you might think, oh, well, see, the Bolsheviks did ignore the democratic will of the people. But what Lenin argues is that the Constituent Assembly represents a step backwards for the revolution. It is a liberal bourgeois democracy, which, if you've read Marx and Lenin, and I'm sure others as well, you know is a very limited type of democracy. They already have a revolutionary proletariat democracy in the Soviets. So why would we submit ourselves to the will of the Constituent Assembly? The Constituent Assembly should submit themselves to us. We are the majority, we are the people, we are the nation. They should listen to us. And when the Constituent Assembly refuses to do that, they say, okay, well then fine, you're not going to be a thing anymore. And they let everyone go home. They don't let them assemble again. And I think the greatest proof that Lenin is correct in his assessment is that there was not a single outcry except from the petty bourgeois and landowners about the Constituent Assembly being disbanded. The workers, the peasants, the soldiers, nobody cared. It was only the people who realized that if we don't have the Constituent Assembly, we don't actually have any access to political power anymore. They were the ones who were angry, but they were the ones who also refused to work with the new revolutionary government. So you made your bed, now you got to lie in it.
I love a beautiful, beautiful overview of a very complicated episode of history. Not because it's necessarily difficult to understand, but just because you have to give so much background information. And that's why it's so easy to just be like, oh no, well there was this democratic organ and the Bolsheviks shut it down. So that means that they were undemocratic. Which, funnily enough, by the way, in the vast majority of quote-unquote democratic and free elections in the United States, particularly small-town elections, there's one person on the ballot. Otherwise, if there are two people on the ballot, it's from the one capitalist party or the other capitalist party, both wildly unpopular, reaching all the way to the presidency, where the political system is so illegitimate and so unpopular that nearly half, and sometimes even more than half, of the American population chooses not to even vote.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Every election, if it didn't vote, was on the ballot, didn't vote, would win. Like, no confidence would win every time.
I think in 2020, the presidential election, everyone was in awe at the voter turnout, and it was like 70%.
Yeah.
And it was only that because everyone was stuck at home and had mail-in ballots. Like, if everything had been going along as normal, I doubt you would have gotten 50% of the people to come out and vote, because, like, who cares? Both of these guys suck.
Yeah, exactly. 66% it was. In 1970, 66%.
We did it
in 2020.
Two-thirds.
Like an absolute
USA.
joke.
USA.
It's even worse in Iran. Like in Iraq, it's like 32%, 30%.
Wow.
And even those numbers are jacked up and false. Surely.
To give like a slight context or whatever, just for people to be able to imagine what the difference is between you establishing a new system and saying this is the way things are going to be run now by the will of the people, and then somebody trying to interject themselves in the new system that you've managed to develop. Imagine, the American Revolution passes, and now they're setting up Congress, they're setting up, the whole American system of governance of an independent United States, but 20 million British royalists there with a lot more money than almost everybody around them in that particular part of the United States. So they utilize their political power in order to buy up a lot of patriotic, non-British Americans, unify with them, etc., in a broader farmers' party, etc. A lot of people that start going to the ballots that want to vote for the proper American farmers' party don't know just how interconnected they are with the British holdouts. They get into the parliament, and now, for some reason, after having won their revolution, obviously these are very two different revolutions, but I'm trying to get contextualize. Now, after the Americans have won their independence from Britain, all of a sudden you have a bunch of hardcore loyalists to Britain that are going to literally get instructions from London on how the United States is supposed to be governed inside of Congress. What the fuck do you think the American revolutionaries are going to do? No, fuck you. The fuck, we don't have to do this. Fuck off, because you want to take us
unite
back
on the one
to
thing that unites them. Enslaving.
Okay, but let me give my allegory, like,
I know,
so that it's understandable, right? So people could argue, oh my God, but that's undemocratic because there's still those 20 million holdouts, and they deserve their place in the fucking thing. But that's not how system building works. That is not how a fight for an alternative to what came before is solidified. It is not how a revolution is defended. Nothing would change ever throughout the history of humankind if you allowed the guys that used to fucking step on your neck for like 1,000 fucking years to then just waltz back into power. No. Why would I do this? Right? And the Soviets even gave them, as much, the Bolsheviks gave them as much leeway as one would when they know that they hold the will of the people, but they rejected. Okay, you reject, we lock the doors. Eat my ass.
Yeah. In the Soviet government, by the way, RSFSR that then became the Soviet Union, it took one generation for former capitalists and aristocrats and white officers and all these people to get the right to vote again. It took people of African heritage in the United States 400 years to be given the right to vote, and even then, they're systematically excluded at every point. Regardless of the point of revolution, right? After a revolution, there's some people who are systematically excluded from elections, for example. Oh, this may be undemocratic in a person who is, I dare say, stupid for their fetishization of liberal democracy. Think about it like this. After Nazi Germany fell, right, denazification needs to happen. A lot of these former Nazis should not be given the right to vote in quote-unquote free and fair elections, as much as such a thing could exist, which is arguable. But that's not what happened in West Germany. No, they didn't even bar them the right to vote. They just grandfathered them into positions of political power, from the military to local mayoral offices, all the way to the top of the government.
They just joined different parties, but were allowed to re-enter the government in whatever way they wanted to.
Just a fresh coat of paint.
All the talk about power and everything reminds me of Mao's aphorism, it's a revolution, not a dinner party,
exactly
stupid.
Right.
You're not, this isn't going to be pretty, we're not going to be nice about it. And then also, obviously, Engels's On Authority essay, which he lays out, look, the bourgeoisie does this to us all the time. Even today in 2025, there is a communist party in the United States, and they are barred from running for elections. This is how political power works. And I think, at least in America and probably elsewhere, the way that the liberal ideology has been so effective is in convincing people that that's not how politics work. Politics are supposed to be civil. You're supposed to vote, and then if you lose the vote, you accept it and you organize for next time. And you're not supposed to go out on the streets. You're not supposed to actually exercise all means of your power or authority. You're supposed to be nice about it. But then as soon as the liberals start to lose ground, as soon as the socialists start to gain ground, they immediately turn to the right. They run to the fascists. I mean, don't get me started on the joke that is the Democratic opposition right now in the United States to Trump. I mean, that's... and I think the reason the Bolsheviks get so much shit is because they understood this and they did not shy away from exercising political power. I bet a lot of people don't know that actually the Bolsheviks at the Second Congress of Soviets that was taking place literally at the same time that the Bolsheviks military revolutionary organization was arresting the provisional government and declaring a Soviet government, the Mensheviks and the SRs were given the opportunity to stick around and join the government, and they voluntarily walked out of the government. leaving only the Bolsheviks and the left SRs. So what are the Bolsheviks and left SRs supposed to do? Are they supposed to say, oh, well, I guess this isn't proper, so yeah, okay, fine, we'll give in to your petulant demands? Or do they say, fine, fuck you guys, if you don't want to do this, we'll do it ourselves?
Yeah.
Which is exactly what they did, but I guess that's anti-democratic.
Yeah. One final addendum to this, especially the American conception of political power. It's like, even if a well-meaning, well-intentioned American is like, oh, yeah, but okay, so they keep us down, whatever. But if we do that, when we get power, then we're no better than them. It's like, no, that's Marvel brain right there. You are better than them. Like, what do they represent? Like 6 dudes in a trench coat that shovel opioids into your mouth and strip the wires from your schools and all these things that are horrible for everybody. And you represent everybody else, not those 6 people. Like, one of those is better for humanity. Like, it should not be hard to determine which that is. It's like this weird, I don't know, false equivalence.
Yeah, to JT's point about, well, if we act like them, don't we become them? No, they are acting this way in order to exploit you, to keep you sick, to keep you in a very precarious material situation so that they can get rich off of your own labor. They are social parasites. They are sucking the life out of the rest of us. We are trying to feed ourselves. We're trying to house ourselves. We're trying to take care of our sick and elderly. We're trying to educate our children. We just want to live our lives. Like, if someone's pointing a gun at you and they want to kill you, but then you have a gun and you point your gun at them, are you as bad at them because you're pointing a gun at them? If they want to kill you and you want to stop them from killing you and other people,
Right.
I think most people would say, no, that's exactly what you should be doing. And funnily enough, it's the people who are constantly in America complaining who also have the guns, who like to think of themselves as the cowboys who are standing up to the dirty communist fascists, who don't understand how the game is played.
Thank you for watching. To gain access to the full episode, receive 2 exclusive episodes a month, get every episode 1 week early, and help us stay as independent as possible, support us on Patreon through the link below.